Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Joining us now is Congressman Eric Swalwell. He's a member of the House Intelligence Committee, Democrat from California. Congressman Swalwell, we are absorbing another night of breaking legal news related to the president and his businesses and his campaign. It's really nice of you to be here with us. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Rachel.
So we've just heard, just announced in the New York Times, that state-level criminal charges are being weighed against the president's business in New York, the Trump Organization. Also, state-level charges being weighed against the president's lawyer, Michael Cohen, who has already this week pled guilty to 8 felonies in federal court. Let me just get your top-line reaction to that news.
Yeah, Rachel, the president right now is facing legal liability on multiple fronts, and not just criminally, but also civilly. And now, tonight, this news shows that much of the liability is also pardon-proof. And with investigators closing in on his family, on his businesses, on his campaign, and his administration officials, the best thing the president can do is to just come clean with the American people, to sit down with Bob, because a lying president, an obstructing president, a witness tampering president is a weak president, and I don't think he can continue to lead with all of these clouds circling around his private businesses and the White House that he must lead for all of us.
Some of the clouds, as you describe them, do seem centered on his business in a way that we have not seen as intensely as we are seeing right now, and certainly on people who are business associates of him, including his longtime personal lawyer, Michael Cohen. But what's your feeling about the seriousness of the campaign-specific charges in which the president has been implicated? Mr. Cohen pled guilty to 2 campaign finance charges. He said that the president directed him to commit those crimes. The president has responded by saying campaign finance violations aren't a big deal. Nobody would get prosecuted for them if I weren't getting, witch hunted for them. Do you think these are serious charges?
I do, Rachel, and as a former prosecutor, I tell you, I don't see how you can separate Michael Cohen's allocution and what he pled to and the person who directed and cooperated with Michael Cohen. So I believe that if Donald Trump was not the president of the United States, he also would have been indicted earlier this week. And also, there's a theory in the law called corpus delicti, which is that you can't just take a guilty plea from a defendant unless there's some other evidence. You can't only rely on that defendant's confession. So that means that the prosecutors had other evidence, and we're seeing that now with Mr. Pecker's evidence. And I think a lot of people are now asking, how big is that safe? What's in that safe, and how do we crack it so that we know just what else is out there?
With so many people close to the president now talking with prosecutors, not only his former lawyer, Michael Cohen, who obviously is in a different position with regard to prosecutors than he was before these guilty pleas, with his representatives saying openly that he'd be very happy to talk to special counsel Robert Mueller, with this report that we've got cooperation and maybe even immunity for Mr. Pecker, a longtime friend of the president, somebody involved in some president's most closely held secrets. I find myself, just as a citizen, worried that the president may feel very squeezed. That doesn't give me any pleasure, because I don't want to think of him either as having done anything that he feels very worried about being exposed, nor do I want to think about the way he might lash out if he feels very threatened. Are you concerned that the president may take some sort of extreme action or do something very unwise in response to all this pressure?
Yes, and certainly last night we saw him stoking, racist beliefs, trying to, bring up things that are just not true going on in South Africa. And he received a sharp rebuke from the South African government. Who knows who else he could lash out at? But right now, I think he sees that he's not going to be held accountable for anything he does, because he has a Republican Congress that is completely unwilling to stand up to him. And I think the best thing that we could do for the American people is to unearth the investigations that the Republicans have buried, and not tomorrow when the Judiciary Committee in the House meets, go back and look at Hillary Clinton's emails, which, by the way, is what we're going to do tomorrow in a special meeting, but to look at the conduct that's so alarming from this president and the people around him.
Literally, the meeting tomorrow is on Hillary Clinton's emails?
They're bringing in someone who investigated the Hillary Clinton email case, and that was scheduled the day after that Michael Cohen pled. So they knew what was on the line and what the American people cared about, and they chose to go in that direction.
It is Friday, the 24th of August of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. That's right. Hey, the French 77s have all been mixed up and are awaiting you in this virtual existence that we exist in. So have at it. Please do. Well. Donnie Two Scoops. I don't think in federal lockup he's going to get the 2 scoops. Okay? Unless everybody gets 2 scoops. Don't go Cane Mutiny on me now. Oh no, leave those marbles back there in the jar, Donnie. Yes. The proverbial S is hitting the fan, and quite a bit of it's hit the fan already, and it's getting splattered all over the place because that's what rotating fans do. You throw some fecal matter at it, it's going to spray all over people. It's going to get a lot of people dirty, and it's going to show who stinks the most. And even if you just stink a little bit, it'll be a putrid odor, and it will follow you. So, well, at the top there, that was Swalwell, basically explaining that if Trump wasn't using the presidency as a human shield, he would have been indicted this week. Candidate number 1. Yeah, and also I can't continue without, I don't know, getting a little adolescent, as if the show is an adolescent, primarily anyway. I can't go on without making some sort of mention about the National Enquirer. Wow, that guy has a safe of evidence. What's the guy, Levin from TMZ? And then the other guy, the guy that was, head of, is it NBC that had Access Hollywood? I can't remember who. But regardless, they have safes as well. But it looks like this guy, David Pecker, he's in a pickle. And it just begs the question. If I flipped a pack of pickled peckers, how many flips would a pickled pecker pack? Inquiring minds want to know. All right. Well, let me give you a little bit of personal family news, if you don't mind, just very quickly. My brother, my Trump bro, and I surprisingly made amends yesterday in some fashion. Spoke honestly with each other. He's not as intractable as I have always presented him to be. And that was very nice. And I think that we may have found a middle common ground in which, we can, be family without killing each other, because they did that in the Civil War. I can see how these divisions would appear in the most brutal fashion. And it's frightening, because when I speak to just, the common Colt 45 that's out roaming the trails, or just going to the local diner, gotta have those biscuits and gravy. Oh, man, that's popular here. And this is Oregon. But I think that they would kill you right now. It's true. What is on the rest of the menu today? In the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, well, the White House gets the Senate GOP to block its own bill to bolster Americans' election security against hacking and other threats. Yeah, they know they can't win without help again. Makes you wonder how much help they've gotten in the past. Randolph County, Georgia, fired the consultant who pushed the plan to close 7 of 9 polling places in a heavily minority district, and they also voted to not only to keep them open, but to increase hours. That's pretty interesting. Good for them. And John Bolton shut down a press conference after a BBC reporter asked if Trump is a security risk. Well, I don't blame John Bolton for shutting that one down, because he knows the answer. After the break, we move to the chef's table where Paul Manafort tried to get the U.S. military kicked out of Central Asia, Kyrgyzstan to be exact, to specifically help Russia. And right-wing vape bully Duncan Hunter blamed his wife for the illegal campaign spending, and then he complained it's so difficult to live on a $174,000 a year salary when you're a materialistic gimmetarian with a prosperity gospel in the pilot house of your foreign-flagged yacht at the most expensive marina in San Diego. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Quickly, this story about the Trump Organization and the Clinton Global Initiative and how it is viewed by, well, some members of the Cult 45 group, and other people are just, well, it seems like what they're hearing is true. And I have made just a short little commentary about how, riffing off of Trump calling whatever, Manafort did, those were like little crimes, like tax evasion, money laundering, simple stuff like that. But flipping, those are major crimes, and there should be a law against it. A mobster would say that. Actually, in the mob world, there is a law against it, and they exact the punishment rather, shall we say, in a final way. But regardless, I just made a joke about those little crimes of Russian money laundering, self-dealing, that kind of thing. And someone, and then I made mention of, well, let's juxtapose that with the Clinton Global Initiative and their terrible high crimes, the horrendous crimes that they committed, like almost eradicating AIDS, educating girls, housing people and feeding the poor, terrible, horrendous crimes that just must not stand. And then somebody came back at me and made mention of have you ever heard of Pizzagate? No, I haven't heard of that. What is that? And of course, they're saying, well, I don't know all of the ins and outs of it, but it is terrible what Hillary Clinton is doing. This goes off on Pizzagate. So then, of course, I had to, basically call them on their BS and express to them that it is BS. Because Pizzagate, as we know, is Russian active measures. And we already know that a guy went to Comet Pizza to save the little kids that Hillary had spirited away to the basement of Comet Pizza. And, the address was well known. It was, we all know the story. And the guy went to Comet Pizza with a gun, shot the place up with little kids and their moms and dads there having pizza and having fun because he believed there was a basement at Comet Pizza in which Hillary Clinton had spirited little kids to sexually traffic them around the world because she's evil and a witch. And I had to remind this person that guy is in jail. And, of course, they'd made mention in this thing, it boggles the mind what is going on there. The information that comes out about that. And I summed up saying, yes, indeed, it does boggle the mind how easy it is to get people to believe BS. I mean, they're still whining about the spotted owl being the reason for the wildfires. If only we had been able to denude all these forests, we would never have had these forest fires. And all the jobs we would have had if we had been able to denude the forests. With no realization of what denuding the forest meant to Europe, for instance. All right. And I've made mention of how hard it is to drill through granite and all sorts of stone work to put plumbing into stone houses. It's hard. I better get on with this. We're just going on and on and on. Let's look at this first offering here. At the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Hey, it's Friday. We're drinking French 77s. Don't have more than 2. You will not be able to walk. Trust me. I know. So, it's almost like anything goes Friday. Not really. Oliver Willis brings us this first offering here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Well, the White House somehow gets the Senate to block their own bill, their own bipartisan bill. For what? What was the bill for? To protect our elections. Trump administration has pressured its Republican allies in the Senate to squelch a bipartisan bill to protect American elections against interference. Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma proposed the Secure Elections Act, which was then co-sponsored by Democratic Senators Kamala Harris and Amy Klobuchar and Republicans Lindsey Graham and Susan Collins. Lindsey Graham, I wonder how many rubles are in his pocket. Before the White House got involved, the bill was expected to pass the Senate and became a rare bipartisan success story for Congress, which obviously must not stand. Republican willingness to bow to White House pressure proves just how little the GOP cares about protecting American election security. The bill would have given the top election official in each state security clearances to receive information on electoral threats, formalized information sharing between the federal government and the states, mandated an audit of federal elections, and incentivized the purchase of voting machines that leave a paper trail, obviously. An enemy of the state. Paper records are especially important in the case, for instance, a Russian hacker managed to change reported vote counts on the internet. If you don't have a paper trail, you can't prove the Russians did it or it ever happened. But this broadly supported bill has been held up in the Senate Judiciary Committee. The bill was set to be marked up and discussed in a Wednesday session of the committee, but a crucial step to get that process started was canceled with no explanation, and the bill could be delayed indefinitely as a result. It wasn't clear exactly who in the White House put the pressure on or who exactly in Congress made the decision to block the bill, but sources say that the decision to hold the bill up was made by the White House and executed by Senate Republicans. Adam Peck, also of Think Progress, brings us this next offering here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Well, Randolph County, Georgia, fired the consultant who said, yeah, let's, since it looks like the Democrats are going to elect the first black governor of Georgia, we can't let that stand. Woman governor at that. Let's make sure, people who are going to vote for a black woman can't vote. There's nowhere to go. Let's close 7 of the 9 offices in which, polling places in which you can vote. Well, apparently that wasn't what he was hired to do, and Randolph County, Georgia, sent him a packing. His name is, let's see here, Mike Malone. Malone was initially hired to fill the role of an election supervisor until the county found someone to assume the position full-time. Instead, he undertook efforts to close all but 2 of the county's polling precincts, a proposal that fell outside his purview. And that's not what he was hired to do. County Attorney Tommy Coleman said local voters and elected officials roundly condemned Malone's proposal, but he defended it in part by citing the Americans with Disabilities Act, claiming that the precincts in question were not ADA compliant. Okay, so find a polling place that is. Now, of course, you know, this guy is well trained from the Federalist Society and Koch-funded schools and think tanks. And all these people are so adept at being able to use process and the bureaucratic method in which to gum up the works. And, despite Malone's proposal, the county's Board of Elections was scheduled to vote on the proposal today. And I have to say, yeah, they voted it down. They're not closing the precincts because, talk about brazen. That brings us this last offering at the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. This week, following National Security Advisor John Bolton's announcement he had failed to reach an agreement with his Russian counterpart on election cyber attacks, he held a press conference in Geneva, Switzerland, and he promptly shut it down after a reporter from the BBC asked him whether Donald Trump is a security risk. Of course not. That's a silly question. And I just spoke to him literally a few minutes ago, and we performed here in exactly the way I think the two leaders would have expected us to. And, you know, honestly, have a little faith in the American people who elected him president. In addition to the allegations that Trump and members of his team accepted election assistance from Russia, Trump has blatantly risked national security on prior occasions, including an incident in which he shared code word Israeli intelligence with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak in the Oval Office. And there's a picture of that, and we have that picture not because our press was allowed in the Oval Office, but the Russian press was. Yeah, they were all yucking it up, too. Oh, yeah, we finally got you in here. What else do you know? Well, let me tell you. Area 54? Or it's really Area 51. It's Car 54, where are you? And the Russians said, wow, that's a part of America we just can't figure out. Bolton, an outspoken war hawk, and former President George W. Bush's rejected candidate for ambassador to the UN, is Trump's third national security advisor since becoming president. He replaced Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster, with whom Trump clashed on a number of issues, and who had in turn replaced Michael Flynn, who resigned in early 2017 and has pleaded guilty to lying to investigators about his dealings with Russia. That's a lot of national security advisors to go through. in this amount of time. Well, it looks like we're going to have to get on to our break, and it might be a tad early, but that's the way it goes. It is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, okay? Well, we will clean up here in the Bistro Cafe, set everything up in the back in the kitchen at the chef's table. We'll move everybody back there, and we'll go through weather from around the world, and then we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Hurricane Lane is a very serious storm.
Hawaii braces for rare impact from powerful hurricane.
I'm getting rid of some of these ridiculous rules and regulations which are killing our companies, our states, and our jobs.
EPA admits Trump's replacement for the Clean Power Plan will kill thousands of Americans. Plus,
the ruling by the D.C. Circuit Court counters efforts under the Trump administration to delay environmental regulations first introduced by former President Barack Obama.
Some good news. The Trump administration keeps losing environmental court cases.
All of that good news and bad straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
We're canceling Obama's illegal anti-coal destroying regulations.
Oh, shut up. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I hope our friends listening in Hawaii have battened down the hatches. It looks like this storm could be pretty bad.
Yes, Hawaii Governor David Ige has issued an emergency proclamation closing schools and mobilizing resources in preparation for significant impacts from powerful Hurricane Lane, which could potentially make a rare direct hit on the island chain. Hurricane Lane has already entered the record books. Lane reached Category 5 on Tuesday, becoming only the second Category 5 hurricane in recorded history to pass within 350 miles of the state. That's according to the National Weather Service.
So this is very rare that Hawaii gets hit by hurricanes at all, correct?
That is correct.
And so I know there are actually not enough storm shelters in Hawaii, so we're just hoping everyone can stay safe over the next few days.
Meanwhile, we now have more information on the Trump Environmental Protection Agency's proposal to replace the Clean Power Plan, President Obama's first ever carbon emission standards for U.S. power plants. The Trump scheme is another attempt to bail out the polluting coal industry. So, of course, they're going to call it the Affordable Clean Energy Rule. But Conrad Schneider, advocacy director of the nonprofit group Clean Air Task Force, tells the Green News Report that the Trump EPA's own data outright states that the Trump plan will actually harm more Americans by increasing air pollution.
They admit that the change from the Obama plan to their proposal would result in 1,400 unnecessary premature deaths per year by 2030. So that's thousands and thousands of Americans who would die prematurely under the Trump plan, whose lives would have been saved under the Obama plan.
Just to be clear, the EPA's mandate is to protect public health. But wait, there's more. Remember how the Trump administration recently proposed weakening vehicle mileage and emission standards?
I do.
Internal emails show the administration had been warned by its own transportation experts that the rollback would actually increase annual highway deaths. Top officials knew that and proposed it anyway.
So they know their new plan for coal plants is going to kill people. They know their new scheme to decrease mileage efficiency standards will kill people. And yet the Trump administration proposes this anyway?
Yes, they do.
Who exactly do they think the Environmental Protection Agency is supposed to protect?
But there is some good news. In just the last few weeks, the federal courts have delivered scathing rebukes to the Trump administration's efforts to roll back environmental protections. We already told you about the federal appeals court ordering the Trump administration to ban all uses of the toxic pesticide chlorpyrifos within 60 days. Then a federal judge in Montana dealt yet another setback to the controversial Keystone XL pipeline from Canada. The judge ordered the Trump State Department to do a new, full environmental impact study on the pipeline's revised route, which will further delay construction. Then a district court in South Carolina overturned the administration's attempt to delay the Obama-era Waters of the United States rule for failing to follow public comment procedures, also known as the Clean Water Rule. It is now in effect, protecting the drinking water in 26 states. Then the D.C. Court of Appeals ordered the administration to immediately implement Obama's chemical safety rule for chemical facilities that were put in place after the deadly 2013 West Texas fertilizer explosion. The court said the Trump EPA delay, quote, makes a mockery of the statute. And then the D.C. court also rejected the EPA's bid to stall rules governing toxic coal ash waste ponds, agreeing with environmental groups that the Obama-era regulations on coal ash waste do not go far enough to protect drinking water. It's kind of weird that losses for the EPA are now considered a win for the environment and public health, but here we are.
Here we are, and it's a reminder how the constitutional Article 3 courts right now are saving us, and why it's so important that folks pay attention to what may be about to happen on the U.S. Supreme Court, who could overturn all of those rulings if Brett Kavanaugh is seated on the court. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find us, follow us, and share us worldwide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Hey, kids and parents, it's back to school time. As you shop for school supplies and get ready for class, make sure you have emergency plans in place. Did you know that emergency preparedness plays a major role in school life? Throughout the year, schools actively prepare for natural disasters, outbreaks, and other emergency situations. Students and parents need to be aware and learn what to do during an emergency. Every family should build an emergency kit, make a family disaster plan, and be informed about events that could affect their community. Parents, take a few extra steps to help children be prepared. Make sure they know the full name, address, and phone numbers of parents or guardians. In our high-tech world of cell phones, memorizing emergency phone numbers is very important. Include a copy of this information in their backpack. Other items to keep in their backpack include water and non-perishable snacks, a pocket-sized first aid kit, a whistle to alert others for help, and a list of allergies, medical conditions, and medications. Make sure their school and teacher have a copy, too. Be familiar with different routes and ways to travel home, like walking, taking the bus, or riding home with another student who lives nearby. Establish a secret code word with your child and whoever takes them home from school to protect against an unauthorized person picking them up. This list is a great starting point to prepare your student for the upcoming school year. Customize these steps to fit your child's capabilities and needs. Ask school administrators and teachers about emergency preparedness plans so you know what steps they are taking to keep your child safe. Many schools have guidelines on how to shelter in place during natural disasters, how to secure classrooms during an emergency lockdown, and how to teach preparedness curriculum to students. Remember, emergency preparedness is important for everyone. Children who are prepared are more confident during stressful emergency situations. By following preparedness guidelines, parents, children, and school staff can improve their safety and peace of mind. For more information on school emergency preparedness, visit cdc.gov/children/schools. To learn more about disasters and emergency preparedness, follow @CDC Emergency on Twitter or visit emergency.cdc.gov. So, let's get prepared. Have a great school year.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Welcome to A Cup of Health with CDC, a weekly feature of the MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. I'm Dr. Jeffrey Nemhauser, filling in for your host, Dr. Kathleen Dooling. As the U.S. population ages, more people are at risk for injuries. The largest percentage of injury-related deaths among this group are caused by falls. Elizabeth Burns is with CDC's National Center for Injury Prevention and Control. She's joining us today to discuss ways to prevent injuries and deaths from falls among senior adults. Welcome to the show, Elizabeth.
Thanks for having me.
Elizabeth, what are some of the more common consequences when a senior adult falls?
Well, first, it's important to note that falls are incredibly common. More than 1 in 4 older adults will fall in a given year. Common consequences include loss of independence and an increased fear of falling, as older adults are afraid to do the same kinds of activities they were doing before. And this can actually lead to more falls, as older adults have less strength in their lower body. Common consequences include hip fracture and traumatic brain injury, and ultimately, in 2016, almost 30,000 older adults died because of a fall.
So are falls more common in men or in women?
Falls are more common in women, and more women go to the emergency department because of a fall, and more women die because of a fall. However, the rate of fall deaths are more common in men than women. What this means is that out of 100,000 men, more will die from a fall than out of 100,000 women.
What are common causes of falls among older people?
Getting on and off the toilet and getting in and out of bed are common causes of falls. Walking around the hallways at night when the lights are off is a common way people fall. There's also an increased amount of medications used in seniors, which have side effects like making them lightheaded, and that increases the risk of falls and is a common cause.
With all of those factors, what are some ways our listeners can decrease their chances of falling?
Older adults should talk to their healthcare provider or doctor about how they can decrease their chances of falling. This can be done during the annual wellness visit or during annual physicals. The doctor will recommend an exercise program that should increase strength and balance, or maybe refer you to a physical therapist. Additionally, they can look through your medications and perhaps reduce your doses or suggest medications that decrease your chances of falls.
Are there things we can do to modify our homes to prevent falling?
Oh, absolutely. Installing grab bars on the side of the toilet, making sure that rugs are taped down or removed, making sure that there's lighting in the hallways are all really simple ways that an older adult can modify their home to prevent falls.
Where can listeners go to get more information about preventing falls?
Listeners can go to cdc.gov/study, and that's spelled STEADI.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I've been talking today with Elizabeth Burns about ways to prevent fall-related injuries and deaths among senior adults. Improving strength and agility through regular exercise and removing potential obstacles in the home can help decrease the risk for falls. If you or a loved one is older and struggle with mobility, talk with a healthcare provider about ways to decrease the risks for fall-related injuries and death. Until next time, be well. This is Dr. Jeffrey Nemhauser for A Cup of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Scientific American podcast editor Steve Mirsky. And here's a short piece from the August 2018 issue of the magazine in the section called Advances, Dispatches from the Frontiers of Science, Technology, and Medicine. Bloodthirsty by Rachel Newer. Mosquitoes are the world's deadliest animals, transmitting diseases that kill hundreds of thousands of people annually. Only the females bite to acquire protein to make their eggs. But blood can also serve as a refreshing beverage on a hot, dry day. A new study finds that dehydrated mosquitoes are more aggressive, land more often on hosts, and feed more frequently than those with ready access to water. In quenching their thirst, they may also increase the spread of disease. The study is by Joshua Benoit, a biologist at the University of Cincinnati, and his colleagues. It appeared in the journal Scientific Reports. Because some mosquitoes lay their eggs on water, researchers have long assumed that wetter conditions lead to more mosquito-borne illness. Yet recent studies have hinted at the opposite, linking increased transmission of diseases such as West Nile fever to droughts. Benoit and his colleagues' discovery helps to resolve these counterintuitive findings. Benoit became interested in the impact of dehydration on mosquito feeding behavior by accident. A worker dropped a container of water-deprived mosquitoes and noticed that they dive-bombed him with much greater vigor than usual. The researchers studied 3 mosquito species that transmit yellow fever, Zika, or West Nile fever. They exposed hundreds of insects to different temperatures and humidity levels in cages with or without access to water and nectar, which is mosquitoes' preferred sugar source. They then tested how often the pests chose to bite a host, in this case a warm, waxy plastic membrane coated in artificial sweat and filled with chicken blood. Within a few hours, up to 30% of mosquitoes without water fed on the host blood, compared with 5 to 10% of those that had water. The findings could have real-world applications for predicting rates of disease transmission. That was Bloodthirsty by Rachel Newer.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. Most Americans during the colonial period lived in small villages or on farms. About 90% of American colonists were farmers. The size of farms varied widely, from small plots of land in New England to immense plantations in the South with thousands of acres. Farming practices varied widely in different regions of the country. In South Carolina, for example, enslaved Africans worked on plantations to grow indigo and rice, mostly for export to England. In New England, farmers raised crops and livestock primarily for local consumption. This meant that New England farmers relied less than Southern farmers on slavery, a fact that would have profound consequences for the future of the country. However, New Englanders did rely on thousands of indentured servants. These are people who agreed to work contracts in exchange for transportation to America, food and shelter, or training in various skills. Indentured servants would typically work for 4 to 7 years to pay their debt. Life for indentured servants could be very difficult, but less difficult than that of slaves. Indentured servants did have some rights and normally gained their freedom after fulfilling their contracts. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
You can help stop the Trump agenda in its tracks. Make sure you're registered to vote. Go to rockthevote.org. And on November 6th, vote for Democrats up and down the ticket. This message, a public service from all the fine people of netrootsradio.com.
From UN headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 minutes. This broadcast is on holiday until September 10th. But instead of running repeats, we've asked foreign policy experts what they'll be paying attention to in the weeks to come. Joshua Messervy is a senior policy analyst for Africa at the Heritage Foundation and has been watching as Uganda's security forces ramp up attacks on opposition politicians and members of the press.
There's been a whole raft of really concerning footage coming out of Uganda recently. There's one MP, a member of parliament, his name is Bobby Wine. His driver was actually shot and killed while Bobby Wine was in the vehicle by Ugandan soldiers, and then Bobby Wine has been held incommunicado ever since. That, unfortunately, is actually part of a pattern, I would say, in Uganda that has gotten worse over the years. The president there, Yoweri Museveni, has been in power for decades now. They've changed the Constitution to allow him, on several occasions, they've changed the Constitution to allow him to extend his rule. He's absolutely an autocrat, and I think he is increasingly willing to sort of brazenly use quite serious force against opponents and dissidents.
The U.S. is a major backer of the very Ugandan units responsible for recent violence, but because of Uganda's role in fighting al-Shabaab terrorists in the Horn of Africa, Messervy is doubtful much will change.
This administration does seem very willing to question conventional wisdom on some of these issues, and perhaps that will manifest in much more skepticism about the military support that the U.S. provides to a place like Uganda. Now, the countervailing theory here is that the administration is also very concerned about terrorism issues. That's a major focus of its engagement on the continent.
Luke Vargas, The United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, the French 77s, have been mixed, and even in a virtual state, do not drink more than 2. 1 is optimum. 2 is, you're going to be, you'll be singing songs of liberation. In the most inopportune times, by the way. So no more than 2, please. We're responsible imbibers. Okay, let's begin with weather from around the world, and we always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 54 degrees Fahrenheit. Yes, a bit cooler this morning, indeed. We are expected to be much cooler than yesterday. We are slated to only have a high of, 81. That's right. And that is much cooler. Looks like the low-pressure trough is weakening the high-pressure bubble. And we'll get into that in just a moment. Winds are currently out of the southwest at about 1 mile per hour. We'll be picking up, of course, to 5 to 10 miles per hour in a few hours from now. And we'll have shifted out of the northwest then. We'll continue that way throughout the day and evening and through tomorrow at a clip of 5 to 10 miles per hour. We will have lows in the mid to upper 50s. Small chance of precipitation, 10 to 20%, which we look at as like, we'll hang our hats on it. We might get some. You never know. Though we will be a bit warmer tomorrow and through the weekend. Only in the mid-80s, though, and we've seen 3-digit temperatures for quite a while. Okay, once again, I mentioned that high pressure pressure is falling, and it is at 30 inches. Visibility is down to 6 miles because we are partly cloudy right now. We are still under an active air advisory, though that's in the region. In my little area, we're down to 82 parts per million, which is moderate on the air quality index. And that's not so bad, so we're getting close to the good. And but for those of you who still suffer respiratory problems, do take care, wear a mask, breathe filtered air if you have to. Relative humidity is at 80%. And there is a definite change in the angle of the sun. I can feel fall a-coming, even though it's the end of summer. Yes, indeed. In fact, today I have family from out of town coming in, and then my son and grandkids will be coming middle to late next week and through the weekend for the holidays, last bash of summer before everybody has to go to school. All right, weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchase. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 65 and partly cloudy. Paris is 68 and mostly cloudy. Rome, 86 and fair. Kiev, 79 and fair. Kabul, 79 and fair. Hong Kong is 82 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 83 and mostly cloudy with a heat advisory and thunderstorms in the area that could impact, local electrical infrastructure. Be careful. Sydney, Australia is 56 and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 57 and cloudy with a fog advisory, very thick fog. And New York is 77 degrees Fahrenheit and perfectly sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Casey Michelle out of Think Progress brings us this first offering. Well, Paul Manafort's been having a rough week. On Tuesday, he was convicted of 8 separate counts of tax and bank fraud, facing potentially decades in prison. Then on Wednesday, a Russian media report revealed that Manafort had spent time working with a now-sanctioned Russian oligarch, Oleg Deripaska, to further Moscow's interests in Central Asia, namely by getting the U.S. booted from the final military base Washington had in the region. The very last one. Well, it's okay. He was just doing a job. Lobbyists do that. The report fleshed out details of a relatively unknown chapter of Manafort's life. What happened after his employer, former Ukrainian strongman Viktor Yanukovych, failed to land the presidency following Ukraine's 2004-05 Orange Revolution. According to journalists Maria Zolobova and Roman Batanin, Manafort landed on his feet by working closely with both Deripaska and Konstantin Kilmenik, a colleague whom Special Counsel Robert Mueller recently said was an active Russian intelligence source throughout the 2016 election. I sure hope those two reporters have some sort of protection. Because, and you can't protect them from everything. You can't protect them from the convenient heart attack. You can't convict them from the convenient polonium poisoning. You can't convict them from the convenient mugging in the lobby of their apartment building. You can't protect them from the convenient 5-story fall, moving a piano, and you don't own a piano, or have a condo at 5 stories high. I just hope they're protected. While Manafort and Kilmenik worked closely in Ukraine, rehabilitating Yanukovych's image and eventually helping Yanukovych win the 2010 presidential election, a few years before he was ousted in the 2013-14 Euromaidan Revolution, it turns out that they had another project on behalf of Deripaska, Kyrgyzstan. Specifically, getting close to Kyrgyzstan's ruling Bakiev family, and even pushing to evict the American military from the Manas base, which served as a logistical hub for American operations in Afghanistan. Well, I'm not really for us staying in Afghanistan, but, I'm certainly not going to work with, our enemies to get us out. Come on. All right. So, with a new government in Kyrgyzstan, protesters had ousted Kyrgyzstan's Soviet-era autocrat in 2005, installing Kurmanbek Bakiev as the country's new president. Manafort's team apparently wanted to capitalize on the country's new direction and redirect Kyrgyzstan's military footprint back to Russia. While we don't know the details, it's clear Manafort and Kilmenik failed entirely to wrest the base from the Americans. The U.S. remained at Manas for nearly another decade, leaving only in 2014. A 2009 agreement later changed the base's name to the Manas Transit Center. However, Manafort's move coincided with 2 other post-Soviet programs that recently came to light, both of which pushed to strengthen Moscow's hand in the region. According to the AP, while he was working to evict the U.S. from Manafort was also pitching projects to Deripaska, one of Russian President Vladimir Putin's close associates, to bolster the legitimacy of governments that are friendly to the Kremlin in Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. Manafort's proposed work would undercut anti-Russian figures through political campaigns, non-profit fund groups, and media operations. And at the same time, Manafort presumably acted as an advisor for organizers of an anti-NATO protest in the Crimea. The 2006 protest, which saw protesters fling rocks and gas bombs at U.S. Marines, ended up helping cancel a joint NATO-Ukraine military exercise. Okay. Well, in other words, he was actively working with our enemies in which to affect military operations. This is way past Benedict Arnold.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Martin Sismar of Raw Story brings us this last offering here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Embattled Representative Duncan Hunter, Republican of California, appeared on Fox News Thursday night and denied all wrongdoing over charges that he misspent $250,000 of campaign money on personal expenses such as a vacation to Italy, dental work, and flying the family's pet bunny across the country. In the interview, the Republican from conservative eastern San Diego County, who was gifted a seat in Congress by his father, and also his name, so you can't tell who was who. I know that name. I've known him for decades. Oh, as a kid. Wow, he looks good. Well, he defended himself from all accusations. Asked point blank if he was guilty, Hunter denied any and all wrongdoing. No, in fact, the events you were mentioning there were fundraisers. That's how people get to hear me and hear what I have to say. Hunter attacked the Trump-appointed U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of California, Adam Braverman, who is prosecuting him, and complained that he doesn't have time to fight the charges before the election. This is a late hit. Hunter did admit saying, F the Navy, after he was unable to arrange a base tour that was to be used as a cover story for his family's vacation to Italy. I guess the Navy wouldn't play along. So instead, Hunter then blamed his wife for anything amiss. Yeah, he went off to Iraq. He was like a reservist. And he went over there and he said, honey, I give you the power of attorney. And he's blaming her for running up the credit cards. Of course, that didn't stop him from, trips to Italy. A nice yacht, though I've seen the yacht. It's more like what I call a pleasure craft. But it is at the most expensive marina in San Diego. Well, then Hunter attacked a Socialist Democrat opponent and complained of the cost of living in Southern California when asked if his salary was insufficient. Oh, yeah, $174,000 a year. Somebody with the prosperity gospel in the pilot house of their yacht ought to be making lots more. And he did. All right. That brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but we will be back on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. Breaking news throughout the weekend on Netroots Radio, so stay tuned. And we will visit with you on Monday in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.